Jormungand, the great beast, the Midgard Serpent, or the World Serpent, is a pretty significant being in Norse mythology. Today we're going to be going over his role in Norse mythology and his importance for the story of God of War. From the moment Jormungand was born to Angerbode and Loki, Loki screamed, alerting Odin to the presence of the Midgard Serpent. He threw the serpent into the sea, and it would lie there and wait until Ragnarok. In the God of War universe, though, the World Serpent is sent back through time during his battle with Thor, because their battle was so destructive that it shook the very tree Yggdrasil itself, and Jormungand was sent back through time. Aegir and Ran, friendly giants who feasted with the gods fairly often, offered to host the next meal, and even offered to brew the drink as well, but they needed the gods to supply them with a big enough cauldron to create the ale. No one could particularly think of anything big enough until one of the gods came up with the idea of asking Hymir for his kettle. As Thor was the only one who was particularly well versed in the affairs and just how to deal with giants, Thor offered to go. When he finally reaches Hymir's house, he ends up eating two of Hymir's bulls, which Hymir had prepared for a couple days, and Thor just ate them all because Thor's, well, not necessarily greedy, but yes, capable of eating a lot. Because of this, they have to go fishing, and to get some bait, Thor ends up slaying the largest bull that Hymir has, and Hymir's not pretty happy with Thor at this point. But they go fishing and they end up catching two whales. Thor then takes control of the boat and rows it out into the open sea, and Hymir warns that they might run into Jormungand, but this is exactly what Thor wants. Thor casts his bait into the water, and after some time Jormungand eventually falls for it, prompting Thor to reel Jormungand in. But as he's doing this, Thor's feet dig into the boat and begin to damage it. Water starts to pour in, but it's not a significant worry instantly. Hymir started to panic as soon as he saw Jormungand's snaky head and cut the line. Jormungand flew back into the sea, or lowered back into the sea, and Thor was pretty upset. So he either bonks Hymir on the head with Mjolnir, or throws him overboard on the boat. Either way, Hymir most likely doesn't survive. Thor then returns home with his trusty Mjolnir, the two whales, and the kettle. Now, there are a bunch more variations of the story. Thor might throw Mjolnir at Jormungand as he's falling back into the sea. Tyr might join Thor because he has some connection to Hymir, but the original version that I told you holds up pretty well. So, in the Prose Edda, Jormungand doesn't escape his fate, that being death by the hands of Thor, but Thor doesn't escape his fate being death by the hands, or the poison rather, of Jormungand. But in God of War, there's a good possibility that he might. After all, Jormungand probably most likely already did during the last Ragnarok when he was sent back in time, so there's a chance that the two might not necessarily kill each other, and perhaps Kratos might kill Thor or something like that. Nevertheless, the two utterly despise each other, with Jormungand going so far as to destroy a statue of the god made out of stone and other things which probably aren't good for Jormungand's insides, but he doesn't care. And you might think that Jormungand might be a bit of a mindless beast, but he's not. He can speak the lost tongue of the Jonar pretty well, according to Mimir. And not only that, but he doesn't attack us when we first see him for the first time. Instead, he offers to help us out. That might partially be because he saw some resemblance to someone he knew through Atreus, that being Loki, and perhaps even seeing that resemblance in Kratos as well. Though he's no friend of Odin, and whilst there's a chance that either Mimir or Tyr has updated on the current whereabouts of Odin and what exactly Odin has been doing, including having Thor go after the Jonar that are on Earth, if Jormungand truly is from another world or another time period in which Ragnarok is already happening, then he was probably already cast into the sea and doomed to loneliness. When he was cast into the sea, he probably didn't have very many friends, being a giant snake that was probably very deadly, and so he was probably alone for a long time, which was most likely very upsetting for him. Away from his kind, the Jonar, away from his family, Loki and Angerbode. So the grudge that he has against Odin isn't exactly unfair by any means. But if he also retains memories of the past, then he could possibly also play a fairly interesting role in the story, maybe giving hints to Kratos or Atreus or someone else in the story about the future and what's to come, though whether or not these hints would actually be useful, considering the fact that the timeline might change and the events might not occur in the same way or occur at all, or his existence in this current story might be the reason why a lot of the events, such as Modi and Magni dying, are actually happening in the story. Jormungand is also beaten by Balder, which I don't think pops up anywhere in the Edda prose, and whilst you're probably thinking Thor is one of the most powerful beings in Norse mythology, and yet he's not able to do it, yet his brother is. See, Balder can't exactly feel pain, and he's not really harmed by anything that Kratos does to him, even snapping his neck. He also has the strength of the gods, and with all of that considered, it's not hard to see why he actually was able to take down Jormungand. Now, considering the fact that Odin had Thor slay all of the giants because of his paranoia, and the fact that Jormungand was the only one to actually survive Thor's attacks, if Balder is clearly strong enough to take down Jormungand no problem, I don't see why he wouldn't have dispatched either Balder or just gotten rid of the Midgard Serpent himself, if it was so much of a problem and so much of a cause of his mental issues. But perhaps Odin just simply didn't have access to Jormungand. Perhaps the World Serpent was just protected underneath the waves of the sea or the ocean. But considering the fact that Jormungand is the last giant alive on Midgard, and that Odin would have wanted every opportunity to perhaps get into Jotunheim and see the giants dealt with fully, completely, and have ultimate peace of mind, I find it hard to believe that there's any other reason other than, for whatever reason, he couldn't access Jormungand for not destroying Jormungand. Of course, Odin had a lot of giants killed by Thor that were on Midgard, and some even in Jotunheim during a little thing that went down when Thor's hammer was taken. The Jotuns that were in Jotunheim exist somewhere, most likely, because Thor wasn't able to destroy all of them that were there, or even establish a proper foothold there, as we're told by Mimir. So I'm pretty sure the giants are still around, it's just their numbers are significantly less than what they would be come Ragnarok. Surt, the fire giant with the flaming sword, he still exists. By this point, Odin could still be very much afraid of an earlier start to Ragnarok, if he wants to necessarily attack giants openly himself, which is why he's still having, or why Thor might be able to still necessarily do that. There's still plenty of games left, and no DLC has necessarily been announced, but over the course of 2 games we'll probably get answers for these sorts of questions. So I suppose we just wait and see. Jormungand protected Tyr's temple underneath the sea, and only a select few who Jormungand allowed access into the temple could actually enter it. Tyr was very much trusted by the giants, and Jormungand is probably biding his time and waiting for Ragnarok right now so that he can know when to attack and when to take down his nemesis, Thor, but perhaps hopefully even get a shot at Odin as well. That's most likely what gives him the bulk of his motivation to guard Tyr's secret temple and to keep the Jonar hidden until they're ready to attack. This might also mean that Jormungand is one of the few beings alive on Midgard that knows the true fate of the giants, the Jonar, where exactly they are. We know that Surt is waiting in Muspelheim, according to Norse mythology at the very least. Odin doesn't seem to be able to touch him for some reason. Mimir even said that when it's time for Ragnarok, it would be Surt who would in fact destroy Asgard itself before being taken down by Thor and Odin. So Jormungand is a pretty important god, and it's hard to think that he's probably part human, or would be part human. See, another interesting thing that will probably change up how things happen is that instantly upon seeing Jormungand, Atreus wasn't afraid of the serpent at all. He didn't scream, but he was really excited. He wanted to find out more about the serpent. He was just genuinely intrigued by it, surprised, amazed. Now, it goes without saying that Atreus is a bit young to be a father, but if he can somehow create his children another way, through magic, it seems pretty impossible that it's going to follow the standard timeline, because apparently Ragnarok is going to be occurring 100 years or a significant amount of time sooner than it otherwise would have, and during that time, Loki's children would have been born, a lot of other things would be put in place, and all of this stuff would connect nicely. But not everything has been given that chance in this version of the story, this universe. So we'll just have to see how that plays out. Just going to add this in at the end here, but Odin might not have hunted down Jormungand for a similar reason that he nerfed Freya by removing her warrior's spirit, an ability to travel between the realms. We hear about this from Mimir, our source of all the vile deeds of Odin, but consider that Jormungand not only is the last remaining giant in Midgard, but also that no one speaks his language, and it doesn't help that he's a giant, big, scary world serpent. If Odin's cruelty gets the better side of his psyche, why wouldn't he just leave the poor Midgard serpent to suffer?
Do you have any idea at all, what you have cost me?
What could Baldur be talking about? Perhaps Odin is a very particular type of strict parent. It might be that part of the reason Thor hates Jormungand so much is that his failure during their first battle is something that Odin holds over him, a chink in their otherwise perfect relationship. But then again, we haven't even met Odin, so there's that. But that was my thoughts on exactly what Jormungand is, what he's doing now, and how he's relevant to the story. Hope that you enjoyed. If you did, go ahead and leave a like, and if you're new to the channel and want to find more content, go ahead and subscribe. And click the notification bell while you're at it. Do you think I was completely wrong? Do you think there's things that I missed? Go ahead and tell me all your thoughts about the video and this Jormungand in the comment section below. But if you want more content and you haven't seen some of my other God of War videos, go ahead and check out the video I did on Thor, and maybe even the God of War universe generally. And until the next video, have a very good day. I have been Prime, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.